Hi Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey Jamie, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fast charging without the heat, but with dramatically increased cycle life. I'm joined today by Dan Alpern, the VP of Marketing at Battery Streak. We've had quite a few guests on the show talk about our fast charging capability, so this is a great follow-on to deepen those conversations. Part one is about our novel technology. So Dan talks us through their fast charging capabilities, their anode and cathode materials, and how they can add value to so many different applications. We're all about adding value here at Take Charge back into our community. So part two is all about our novel generation and the small task we have ahead of us of saving the world, or at least our existence on it. We make observations of the generations gone by, the challenges that our current generation has ahead of us, and how we can remain resilient to ultimately succeed. We hope you enjoy. This has been in the works for a while, so it feels like it's been some time since we first spoke, but good to be here. Let's start with your background from the Navy to batteries. How did all that happen?
Well, there's no easy path, and I'll just say that I've been very lucky in my career, and I've had the e-ticket ride, if you remember the old tickets from Disneyland, for the best rides. I was a proud Navy service member back in the 80s when Reagan was president. Ship control and navigation had nothing to do with anything I did in my civilian career, but it did instill in me a pride of working for the Navy and the country, and that continued later in my career. So after the Navy, I had a long career in media. I was in television, sales, magazines, started up some new properties, and that gave me a really solid background in both sales and marketing. And then eventually I ended up back at the Navy as a civilian marketing director out here in California, and stayed there longer than I expected for about 13 years, and retired a couple of years ago from that job. But it gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of technology and a lot of programs that the Navy was innovating to accelerate innovation and adopt it quicker. The DoD is pretty traditional for having a lot of red tape and being a very big ship that doesn't turn very quickly. So they've recognized their needs to, as we went through the Afghanistan war and some of the other activities that we've had, to get new material and technology that's available out to the troops as quickly as possible. And so since that time, we've seen a number of accelerators start, the Defense Innovation Unit, Naval X, the Army X-Tex Prize. All the services are involved in trying to accelerate both their awareness of technology and their adoption of technology. So I wasn't looking necessarily to come into the battery world. I am not a chemist or an engineer, which are some of the more traditional paths to get into the battery world. But I did have some friends that were starting a company, and we would talk at social gatherings, and they were surprised at my awareness of the issues that they were facing and the opportunities in the market. And I would say that I am one of those jack of all trades guys, being a marketing and a sales guy. You learn a lot about everything, even though you're not an expert in anything. And so being aware and being able to connect them to a couple of the programs that were going on here locally was exciting. And when they got funding, they asked me if I was interested in joining the team. And I jumped at the chance, because this is truly, as we'll talk about, a revolutionary technology and has the opportunity to really make a difference in people's daily lives. And that's always an exciting project to get involved with.
Well, I'm going to stretch your knowledge, not being an engineer or a scientist. So, I mean, first of all, before we get into the technology, what's the current status of Battery Streak, and what are the goals in place moving forward?
So Battery Streak, we're a small startup. We're just celebrating our 7-year anniversary. Really exciting time for a startup. We've gotten some traction. We've met a lot of our goals to ramp up our production, and we are currently in a position where we're looking to raise just a little bit more money to extend our runway. Pretty typical for a startup. But what's exciting is everything that we're doing, we're able to do today. So nothing is aspirational. And COVID certainly slowed us down a little bit, like it did everybody. We had a lot of equipment that was sitting on the boat and waited a year before it got here. Everybody remembers the logistics problems we had. So we did the best with what we had available at the time and focused on developing our materials, and actually came out with some second generation materials during the COVID time. And now we're exciting. We're shipping product to customers. We're being evaluated, and we're about ready to sign some pretty big deals for commercial manufacturing of our product and cells. And we'll talk more about that here in a minute.
Yeah, brilliant. And the technology, what's the solution specifically?
So in the non-technical, easy way to say it is if your cell phone, your laptop computer, your EV, they all take up to an hour to charge, and they get really hot while they're charging. Our technology allows a battery to charge in 10 minutes or less without the heat. And because there's no heat, it will last up to 3 times longer. That's our current testing. So basically, we're working with both an anode and a cathode material that were developed at UCLA. We have the exclusive patent to commercialize this product. So we're working with nanostructured titanium niobium oxide as an anode, for example. And basically what we're doing is we're making on a molecular level a little sponge, and we're giving the lithium ions a place to rest. So rather than a chemical phase change where there's a bond that's forming and breaking and releasing heat, it's more like a capacitor. Lithium ions are finding a place to rest, and we store charge as a surface charge with minimal chemical bonding taking place. So we don't get any warmer than about 35 degrees Celsius or body temperature, even when we're fast charging or doing a high power output. So in the battery world, I've heard actually some of your guests allude to fast charging or charging lithium ion batteries as a parking lot problem. There's one entrance to a parking lot, and as it gets full, everything slows down. I think using that same analogy for Battery Streak, we're a parking lot with multiple entrances, and that's that sponge-like material on a molecular level. There's a lot of ways for lithium ion to come in and find a spot to rest on. And like I said, we store it as a surface charge. So we say we charge like a capacitor very quickly, but unlike a capacitor that has a high self-discharge rate, we're able to deliver power like a battery.
So when the charge becomes, let's say, 70, 80%, of course, at that point, typically the rate of charging would slow dramatically. With your technology, does it stay at the same rate of charging?
So all the testing we've done today is what they call constant current, constant voltage. So we are leaving the fire hose open. And obviously, when we get to the end, the voltage will come down a little bit, and that's normal. But for the most part, our material can accept as much energy as we're throwing at it.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you might have been alluding to Beam Global. Saeed was on the show, and their solution, or his solution, was more about how they take advantage of heat. So I think they were kind of getting up towards kind of like 45, 50, and actually taking advantage of it, and then using some very interesting matrix technology to fast charge. But in your case, it's not getting beyond 35 degrees, but achieving that. Did you mention that that's positive for cycle life as well?
Absolutely. And so what we've seen in our actual testing, a lot of people are using computer projections, but we actually did this test where we charged at 6C and discharged at 3C, and we do it for 9,000 cycles. Okay, so most lithium-ion batteries have what they'll call that knee, or that drop-off. When they get to below an 80% state of charge, the battery will just die. What we've seen with our materials is there's a very linear degradation. It's very predictable. So we're going, in one test we've done, we're showing that the battery goes to 80% state of charge after 3,000 cycles. But more importantly, we extend to 9,000 cycles and still retain a 60% state of charge. So if you think about environmental sustainability and second use applications, you could take a battery pack out of an EV, let's say, and put it in a forklift at a warehouse where it doesn't necessarily need full capacity. Or another application would be to take it and put it on the wall of a home storage unit for solar power charging. They don't need the full capacity of the battery or the speed. But you correctly alluded, the trick is, without generating heat, there's a lot of things you don't need to do. So I'll use an extreme example. F1 racing, they have a kinetic energy recovery system, which is basically a battery. And they are getting this battery to extremely high temperatures to be able to accept the power that it can take during a race. The problem is it's a very, very short cycle life because you're punishing that battery. With the energy that they're putting in, they're heating it up really hot to get it to accept more energy faster. But the cycle life is very low, and they replace those units very frequently in an F1 car, or if you look at a hybrid racing car, for example. The difference is with our material, not only will it operate at a lower temperature, but in many cases, it'll reduce the need for a thermal management harness. So some battery manufacturers are making round batteries with spaces for air to be between them. Others are actively cooling it with a radiation system, where they're circulating liquid to try to draw the heat off. With our materials, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that, or you could dramatically reduce the thermal management harness, and there's a longer cycle life. Now, if you're using our battery, let's say in an F1 car or a drone, where they only maybe last 12 cycles or fewer than 50 cycles, is our cycle life going to be degraded? Yeah, I doubt you'll get 3,000 cycles in that kind of use case, but you'll still get significantly more than they're getting today, than the 12 to 50 cycles they're getting today. Our cycle life has been really one of the more exciting things when we talk about sustainability. And it's worth mentioning, when we're talking about lower temperatures, there's an increased safety. We've never had an issue with thermal runaway. There's no dendrite buildup based on the chemical properties of our battery. It doesn't work the same way as a similar lithium-ion battery, where that is that plate, those dendrites that push through. And we don't have any off-gassing. Once the battery is formed, there's been no gassing or no need to make an allowance in a pouch, for example, like some of the technologies do.
Are you sure you're not an engineer or a scientist?
No, but I listen to them very carefully, and I make sure I stay in my lanes. When I talk to them, if they tell me we can do X or Y, I will challenge them in plain English and go around in circles to make sure I know where the gutters are, if you will, in a bowling alley.
I think you undersold yourself at the start. This is very interesting, Dan. In terms of application areas, so are there any limitations to your technology in regards to application areas? Are there any application areas that are advantageous based on your offering?
That's an exciting question for me, because as the marketing guy, I'd love to say that this is the best thing since sliced bread, and it's going to be perfect for everybody that uses a battery. But we know that's not always the case. And I firmly believe that in the battery world, there are multiple solutions that are going to be successful. And there are give and takes. As our CEO, David, likes to say, physics doesn't give us anything for free. So we're going to pay the cost in one way or another. So to answer your question, in terms of markets, some of our first markets, we're working very closely with both the Army and the Navy. We have a CRADA, Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, signed with Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, here in Indiana, in the United States. They're one of two labs, Crane and Cataract, that do all the power needs for the Navy, everything from lithium-ion batteries all the way up to nuclear power plants and ships. So they are testing our material. They've already submitted us for an Arctic drone project, which is very exciting for us. And they are putting together the drone, the BMS, the pack manufacturer, and a really great team of people to work on this one project. And we've been working really well within that infrastructure and the Naval X infrastructure and the group here locally, FathomWorks, to introduce our technology. But as I mentioned earlier, engineers, first of all, don't know it's available, so they don't know to ask for this. So I've got to bang the drum and get the word out. And the second thing is, engineers generally like evolutionary change. They want to see small increments of improvement. And this technology really is revolutionary. If you think about a television back in the day with big tubes and the whole thing was a console this thick, now we have screens that are flat panel. It's still a television, but it's a very different revolutionary change from where we started with tubes. Our battery is similar. It's still a battery. It still powers, okay, whatever you need it to power, but it's a very different paradigm for people to understand. And I think the market is slowly starting to understand, and it doesn't hurt that Nobel Prize winner Stan Whittingham is starting to work with niobium. He has recognized some of the similar properties that we see, the lack of heat being generated. Now, luckily for us, what we're working with is nanostructured titanium niobium oxide that was developed at UCLA, and they have exclusively licensed all their IP to us. So our IP isn't a process. They're fundamental composition of matter patents. We've got 5. I think we just got our 5th. We've got a couple pending and a couple that are going to be divisional. But we're very excited, and we're standing on really solid ground with that. And there are other companies working with niobium, but I describe it as if we're working with a sponge-like material, they're working with a brick, where they're only interacting with the surface area of whatever form they have, where we're allowing the lithium ions to penetrate into the sponge-like material at a molecular level. So I'll continue. Yeah, so markets for us, I mentioned the DoD. We'll see applications. We're seeing strong interest from power tools, as an example. They have a need to deliver high power and short bursts. And we've also learned recently that for professional users, they have to let their instruments cool down before they can recharge them. So we eliminate all of that. It doesn't get hot while it's operating. You can instantly recharge it and then be back on the job. If you think about autonomous warehouse robots or these big warehouses for Amazon, people like that, they're buying 2, 3, 4 pieces of equipment, tablets, batteries for every employee. So they'll use one, they'll be charging one, there'll be one ready to go. This is, from an economic perspective, an immediate improvement. They could buy one pad per employee, and they could charge it when they're taking a bio break or going to lunch and be right back on the job with the same piece of equipment. Out here in California, our state legislator has banned gas gardening equipment, so the leaf blowers and the lawn mowers and everything. So here's a solution. A professional gardening contractor or landscape contractor could have electric equipment that they're going to be required to buy, and they could charge it between jobs rather than having to buy 2 or 3 batteries for each job as they go through their day, which is what they're doing currently. So there are a lot of exciting applications. And obviously I mentioned EVs earlier. That's very far down the sales cycle for us. If an EV manufacturer came to us today and loved the material and wanted to start making their cars with batteries, it would be 5 to 7 years before we'd ever see that car in the wild. So that's why I mentioned some of the smaller applications. If you think about medical devices, a lot of those companies make their own batteries when we're talking about hearing aids or heart devices, diabetes, on-skin monitors. When you think about prenatal care, babies can't tell you that something's getting hot on their skin or is uncomfortable. So when we've seen a strong interest from the medical community for this technology, if it doesn't get hot in the first place, it's inherently safer. Same thing from the Army. They're looking at this for wearables for its future soldiers. They're powering their augmented reality, their communication gear, their technology, their computer technology, their drones. If they can have a safer battery pack as a wearable for a soldier, then you've got a safer environment for that soldier to operate in. So it's exciting for me. Anything that uses a battery can use our technology. But the first applications will be where there's a strong economic need, where there's a quick time to market. So both the DoD and some of these smaller applications I'm talking about, and where they have a critical need for one of our value features. So either the safety, the fast charging, so that's convenience or luxury, if you will. People think about if you have a power bank, when you're traveling through an airport, everybody's fighting for a plug, trying to spend as much time charging up their phones. You could take a power bank with a battery made from our material, charge it in 5 or 10 minutes, and then power your phone when you're on the plane and not have to worry about fighting for a USB slot or a power slot. So yeah, the applications are endless, pretty much anything that uses a battery, but things that need safety, fast charging, high power, like a construction tool, those are the things that are going to be first to adopt this technology.
I should have mentioned at the beginning of the episode that there's a kind of part one and part two to this episode. So, of course, the part one more about the technology and applications. Part two is about personnel and generational personnel in our industry. So we'll get into that in a second. But just before we do, I wanted to mention the intelligence around those applications. As you mentioned, sales cycle for EV is 5 to 7 years before anything truly happens. You need to demonstrate a certain amount of years of data before you can even start having the conversation. So now I think there's a lot of, there's obviously been turmoil in the EV world. And as a battery manufacturer, battery technology business, I think it makes a lot of sense to have diversity with your application areas. And of course, as a marketer for you, it makes it much more exciting too. So it's now good stuff and good luck. Just before we move on, in terms of the future and the plans for Battery Streak, it sounds like maybe focusing on a phase of fundraising before then the next steps. What do you see the next kind of 2-3 years looking like for you?
Well, the exciting thing about a startup is that you don't have time to do things in series. You kind of have to do everything in parallel. So while we are currently working on some fundraising to extend the runway, that's an ongoing process that we started at the beginning of the year. We're also working, we've shipped product to major manufacturers and potential customers, so they are evaluating our materials as we speak. And we've actually just gotten some in this last month. We've gotten some of our first requests for qualifications for some large battery manufacturers. And I should back up and mention that we are a materials company. We make anode and cathode materials. And one of the exciting cathodes that I haven't mentioned is a nickel and cobalt-free cathode material called LVPF that we're currently developing. So that's exciting, but we're not looking to go into the battery manufacturing business. We're not cell manufacturers. We're not pack manufacturers. We're not software engineers to write the battery management systems. So our business model is twofold. For the smaller users, we will sell material to the DoD, to maybe a medical device company. And for the larger, let's say up to EV size, but even for a larger power tool or computer company, we'll work with their pre-existing suppliers. And while that power tool company will never be our customer, we're selling them now on the capabilities. So they will tell their battery manufacturer and their materials supplier, hey, let's source this from this company. So we'll sell material or we'll license the process for people to make it on a much larger scale. Currently, we've gone over the last 7 years from making milligrams of material in the lab to kilograms of material per batch. So right now we make about 5 kilograms of material per batch, and we'll turn that over, we'll turn over 4 batches in a week when we've got the dial turned up.
Good stuff. And yeah, good luck with that evolution. And of course, the fundraising round as well to extend the runway. So yeah, something that you and I discussed kind of, pre-recording and, many months ago was your observations of the industry and more specifically the talent in the industry, the personnel. And of course, as an industry, it is still fairly young and there is a pretty diverse from industries I've worked in, mining, for example, and medical devices. I'd say batteries is one of the more diverse industries. We've got that going pretty well, although of course there's areas for improvement. What have you observed? What differences and similarities have you observed from your kind of former career to your current career and the kind of personnel within it?
That's a great question, Jamie. I mean, the thing I think that's impacted me the most is, like I said at the beginning, most of the people that work in this industry are the engineers, the chemists, the process managers, and it requires a high level of schooling and a high commitment. So I've been really impressed by the caliber of people working in the industry that we worked with directly, some of our employees, and some of the people that we've worked with from some of our prospective customers. So they are people that had a lot more focus than I did in college, and they know what they want to work on. They're prepared for their new careers, and they have a really good understanding of the market they're getting into. I think on the other side of that coin, though, is there's a lot of people that I think expect instant results and gratification from their professional careers. In my day and age, there was a real sense of paying your dues and working your way up the corporate ladder. I see a lot of people now that have an expectation maybe to move through jobs or opportunities faster than their experience would, give them an idea or give them credit to do. So I've worked on this project and now I should be in charge of the lab. And I think what I see missing from that is what I would call seasoning, the opportunity to work and have some experience and understand not only the technical fields, but what I like to call the social lubrication. How do you work with managers? How do you bring someone on board? How do you work with the supplier when the relationship is not at its best, but you guys still need to work together in a positive and constructive way? And keeping emotions out of it is something that you learn as you mature, your business maturity grows. And you don't get that necessarily out of school these days, where everybody's really working in team environments and it's all about a group goal and everybody has a say. That's not always the way it manifests itself in business, and certainly in a small startup where things happen at a much rapid pace. And in a small startup, you end up wearing a lot of different hats. You may not be doing everything that you expected to do within your chosen career path. You may be asked to step outside a little bit and maybe help with the administrative paperwork or the invoicing and accounting as supplies and precursors are coming in and you're responsible for those things. So that's been really interesting to watch and see the differences between the generations moving forward.
I guess they're claims and comments that have been, quite commonly made. Maybe that sense of entitlement or wanting to progress quicker than maybe their experience justifies. I have my own theories and thoughts around why. I'd like to hear from you first before I comment. Why do you think that has happened? Why do you think that is the case?
Well, let me preface it by saying that's not. I'm not making a sweeping generalization for a generation. We saw the same thing when I was coming up, and the term we used to use back then, where people were slackers, or they were skating. So it's nothing new, and it's always been that way as we look between the generations. And it's always the case that the differences are what get highlighted or focused on. I think, in my experience, I think why we're seeing it in some cases today with some people, because it's certainly not everybody in the younger generation, but I think there's a sense of coddling that took place, or, my generation, we talk about, we didn't get participation trophies just for playing sports. There were winners and losers, and that was valued, and that was part of our culture at that time. Where that has gone away, or I like to tease my sister that she's been a little bit of a tiger mom with my nephew, where she was helping him through every stage of their life. Now, I think that's great. That support and the opportunity to have sound advice available, especially for the kids that are taking it. But I also think that in some places that's led to this feeling that, okay, I'm here now. I've been getting gold stars my whole life and straight A's, and this is the job you hired me to do. And my expectation as a newcomer is that I should be in charge now really quickly. Otherwise, I'm failing. I'm not advancing at that level. I've seen myself advance or be recognized throughout my whole school or maybe my early professional career. And I think people don't like to hear that. You got to earn your chips a little bit, or you need that seasoning that I'm talking about, and that there would be some value to. And when I was in the Navy, we used to call it time and rate. You had a mandatory time before you were allowed to be promoted, even if you had met all the pre-qualifications. And then if you were one of those people that were pre-qualified on the date that you had met the time and rate qualification, then you would be eligible for promotion. And that was, I think, the Navy's way at that time to build in that sense of experience, or making sure that a sailor had been through a few evolutions and knew what he was talking about when he was going to be a leader of people.
I think it's fascinating. I think there's maybe also some claims that today's generation is maybe softer. In my opinion, I think they're actually harder and more resilient, and I'll say why. I mean, first of all, in terms of why the changes happen, I think a big part of it is social media, and social media also includes LinkedIn. So when you're kind of in a job and you're kind of going to work and you're enjoying your work, you don't have as much access to comparing yourself to other people. Whereas on your social media platform, you see somebody, with an inspiring quote about how they've established this business or how they're gaining these promotions. You only see the best side of what people are doing. Same on LinkedIn, you see people getting promoted and moving around and doing new things. So all of a sudden in your mind now, you have this access to, much more options and opportunities. And it just makes you think. If you have a bad day at work, it just makes you think about all these other options. So you're kind of not settled. You're always kind of second guessing your decisions and you never really feel 100% in it. So I think for that reason, you're kind of battling mentally with what you're doing, what you're doing in this job, kind of what you're doing day to day. And it means that you maybe have to look elsewhere. And maybe that kind of drives the whole need for promotion and to climb and to progress. And I mean, the whole kind of social media thing, access to bullying obviously is like a huge thing, especially in the youth of today. Couldn't even. I mean, my brother-in-law, he's like 15 years old, and unfortunately, he's struggled with that and kind of online bullying, and it's just unbelievable, kind of what they have to deal with sometimes. I think that is a big factor in all of it. And then, in terms of, I forgot my point. There's something else, but anyway, I'll let you go. I mean, what do you think about kind of those comments?
Well, I'll absolutely agree, and I'll share some key differences that David and I were talking about recently in preparation for this. They are tougher in a lot of sense. They're the first generation that's grown up with screens from day one, as an example, which is very different than the world I grew up with, carrying around punch cards and hoping you didn't trip coming off the bus and they got out of order and your program wouldn't run correctly. But along with that, and the challenges that brings, and the pressure, the social media and the LinkedIn, the opportunity to have wider exposure, we've seen the impact that's had. People are more willing to not stay on a job for 40 years and get the gold watch, if you will. They're much more willing to jump to another opportunity. And the ones who do it right are being successful and moving up a spiral ladder pretty quickly. But some people jump jobs too much, and people wonder, well, what's the matter? Why didn't you stay there? And that will change over time, as I think people are more merit-based and qualification-based in their hiring practices. But it's interesting that this generation doesn't have any analog examples. So we still say dial the phone. We're not dialing anymore, if you will. So little things like that they don't understand in the world that I work in media, and the world that you're working in with the podcast. We used to literally record on tape, and if we wanted to edit, we had to cut the tape and paste it back together and make sure that it was perfect. It's so much easier now with digital. You can work so much faster. You can be a lot more creative, but the opportunity for distribution is different as well. So we saw that in the music industry. Once they broke the model of the record companies and concerts, they were able to distribute music directly on platforms back in the day, like Napster or SoundCloud now or something, but directly reach a market. And the media world has become so fractionalized after a time was so long, it was so condensed. And, there were 3 major channels or maybe 4 major channels back in the day where you got all your information from. Now you're able to get your information from anywhere. I'm a big fan of YouTube University, and I see people going out and teaching themselves how to do things that they didn't necessarily go to school for, and then executing on plans that are generating income for them. It's really the Wild West right now for this next generation. And when we talk about the battery industry and EVs, it's tough because it's a really rigid industry. It's very inflexible in the rules and how you go through it. But we're seeing a lot of innovation come in from the side doors, if you will, or a lot of opportunities for newer companies or people that have split off from previous companies with one idea and just wanted to run with it. So it's incredibly exciting to me, the opportunities that are going to be available in the next few years, and how business is going to get done and how those changes are going to get done, because obviously there's a much more of a focus on a work-life balance today than there ever was before. And for the right people that are checking the boxes and able to get the work done and able to successfully work in a hybrid office situation, if not in a plant, the world is their oyster, as they say.
No, it's changed, that the world of work has changed so much, careers have changed so much. And I remember what I was going to say before was around instant gratification. You touched on it before. And again, similar to my generation, so I'm a millennial, but then of course before me is the Gen Z. Instant gratification is a thing. So if you if you want some food, you order a Deliveroo. If you want a date, you swipe right. I've never had Tinder, but I think that's what you do. But anyway, you can get anything at a touch of a button. Amazon is so good these days. You can get a delivery the next day. You can get anything you want so quickly. A career isn't like that. As we know, you need to put years into something, research, hard work, failures, building that resilience. And because, to get a meal, to prepare a meal, it was a bit harder. To actually get a date, it always used to be a bit harder. We didn't have dating sites, to actually buy something, you needed to go down the shops and get something. Very, very kind of minor examples, but careers take a long time to establish. And I think as well, we talked about social media. All people see is the tip of the iceberg. You say this amazing product, this person's an overnight success, and you don't see those years of failure and pain and things like that. So I guess the whole reason we're talking about this is to advise our generation that is ultimately going to save the world with battery technologies. It's like, stick at it. It's like one of the hardest things to do. Obviously, you and I aren't engineers or scientists, and we need this generation to succeed.
Yeah, well, I'll say it another way. When I spoke earlier about seasoning or the need for experience, you really hit the nail on the head when you talk about failure. And it was so important for me in my career, I'll just speak for myself, to go through some failures and not only learn how to accept them, but not think of myself as a failure because something I was doing professionally didn't work out the way I expected it to. It was really a growth opportunity and a maturing opportunity for myself. But I find now that those failures early in my career have given me an incredible depth of perspective that I'm able to bring to the job today. And so a lot of times I've worked with, not here at Battery Street, but at other companies, I've worked with younger people, younger employees. And a lot of times what I'll hear is, well, we need to make our own mistakes. We need to learn for ourselves. Okay, you give them a little rope. But the next cycle comes around and they're making the same mistake. And the discussion that I have is, I let you try it the way you wanted to, and you didn't want to listen to advice and it didn't work. But here, you didn't learn from your mistake. You made the same mistakes. And so there's an important conversation to be had. And there's a valuable approach in how you come to the table as someone with experience, but trying to share the value of your experience and why these things may have not worked in the past or why you think they may not work today. And you can explain it, and having someone that's going to be receptive, because the people that I've seen move the fastest up the ladder are the people that are receptive to learning from other generations, both older and younger. And when they can quickly assimilate the value of those lessons and incorporate it for themselves, in my day, you had to spend hours or days reading a book on success or sales or good business management practices. And when you have the opportunity to get that verbally in real time in a meeting or from a mentor, I think it's definitely something that's worth taking advantage of. And just like we all say about our parents or grandparents, wow, I didn't know that about them. And I really learned something. I wish I would have spent more time when I was younger because these things were really valuable. Or as I like to say, if I was half as smart as I'd like to think I was, I would have listened to a lot more of the warnings my parents gave me, because all of the mistakes I made in my life, I was told about. And I had to still touch and see that the fire was hot, if you will.
To close off this chapter, I'm pretty sure you just answered this question, because a really good comment you made on learning from different generations. But for somebody maybe about to graduate, maybe complete their PhD, entering the world of batteries, in whether it be research and development, engineering, whatever it might be, what's your best advice for them to help them settle, thrive, and contribute to our overall mission of electrifying the future?
That's a great question, Jamie, and I really appreciate it. And I'll share with you the advice. I do a lot of public speaking and volunteer work with some of the local community schools here. And what I always say is, it's great if you have your training, your degrees, your success packaged up and ready to inject. But when I'm interviewing somebody or when I'm sitting on a panel, I'm really curious and I'm most interested in the applicants that have done their homework, that understand what we're trying to do and why the role we're offering them is available. And when they understand what that role is and how they might add value to it and where that role may take them in their career or how it may help them develop, I think it's a really important component to understand. And if you will, I look at a new applicant as a puzzle piece. Show me that you fit into my puzzle. Show me that you understand what my puzzle is and what I'm trying to do. And I think that's probably the best advice I'd give a youngster coming out, knocking on the door for their first job or two. If you're going to come to Battery Streak and knock on the door, understand what I'm doing and understand the value you're bringing to me. If you're going to go knock on the door of Tesla or a big established corporation like Ford or GM, understand that they're a big company and you're a very small fish in a big pond. How are you going to protect yourself and navigate yourself through that environment? And take the time to ask people that work there before your interview. And if the person that invited you to interview gives you an opportunity to ask any pre-questions, I would fully avail myself of those opportunities.
Great advice. Dream big, be open-minded, learn from people. You never know everything. So, well, good, very good. So to finish, we have a new tradition now, well, fairly new tradition. We have a question from a former guest. So you don't know who this is, and it's not the previous guest, so you can't just say it was Halavai, for example. So this is a question from a former guest, very, very simple one. Why do you work in the battery industry?
I love that question. I like working with startups, so I like being here at Battery Streak, but specifically, I like the idea that what we're working on, if we're successful, we will have a real impact on the world, that we will make a difference in people's lives. And that's just an exciting, incredibly exciting and interesting opportunity. You don't always get that at every job. You know, if you're just screwing on toothpaste caps or stamping out a metal piece, there's not a lot of personal satisfaction. I've been involved with green industries, whether it's waste or recycling, erosion control, stormwater management, through a number of various products that I've worked with in the past. And the opportunity to make a change in the battery world that may help batteries last longer, charge faster, be more convenient and safe for people in their everyday jobs is really an exciting proposition. It's something I'm really proud of doing here at Battery Streak.
So from Navy to battery, it's maybe a pathway others should follow, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. Certainly in the Navy, they learn a lot about batteries and battery safety. It's important on the boats and the ships. So maybe there'll be a few more that follow me over.
Nice. And it's good to hear that obviously that's a key application area for you, and good luck with the samples and all the great work that you do in there, and with the funding. And yeah, appreciate your insights on our generation and providing some advice and insights. I think it's always super interesting. So Dan, thank you for coming on. Appreciate you joining, and good luck with everything.
Absolutely, Jamie. Thank you so much for not only your time today and talking to us, but your interest and understanding of what we're trying to do over here at Battery Streak. So I really appreciate it. And good luck to you. I think I mentioned earlier, right before the show, I'm a subscriber to the podcast, and I've loved the interviews you've done. You've done a great job of finding some really interesting people to talk to and some incredibly insightful people for different aspects of the whole industry. So I'm enjoying watching your journey blossom, and good luck to you guys over there.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And that's a good reminder. Everyone listening, please subscribe. A last little plug.
There you go. Like and subscribe.
Cheers.